Right, so here we're going to try and sketch a graph of this fourth degree polynomial. And embedded in sketching a graph of this function, there are a lot of questions that we have worked very hard to learn how to answer that we are going to need to answer in order to sketch this graph. So the first thing that we want to kind of think about is when we're graphing a function like this, a fourth degree polynomial, what are the things that we're going to need to know? So the first thing that we're going to want to know, obviously, is what's the basic shape, right? And from my parent function, I'm going to be able to tell what the basic shape is. And so kind of off to the side, we'll just jot down a couple of things. The basic shape, well, this is a negative, there's a negative coefficient out front. So we're thinking about the parent function x to the fourth with a negative out front. It's going to be going negative in both as its end behavior for both sides. So as I move to the left and to the right, it's going negative. And then the second thing that we always want to know are the roots. And here is where we kind of run into a whole bunch of different things that we're going to need in order to accomplish this. And in order for me to find the roots here, I can't just use the quadratic formula or anything like that right off the bat. I'm going to need to think of some other ways to break down my function. And so what would really help me find the roots? Well, if I knew the factors, if I could write this in factored form, I'd be golden. Okay? And in this question, we are told that there's a root at x equals 1. All right, and so what does that mean? Well, what we know from that is that this is actually a factor, right? We know that x minus 1 is a factor. And since it's a factor, well, we know one of the factors. If I could find all the other factors, I'd know all the other roots. So because it's a fourth degree polynomial, I know that I'm going to have 4 linear factors. 4 linear factors. And I know one of them, so if I can find the other 3, I will also be able to find the other roots, and I'll be able to go ahead and sketch my graph. So let's just kind of write down what it is that we're dealing with so that we can solve for what we're looking for. So I have my function. That's not quite going right. I have my function, negative x to the fourth minus 4x to the third minus x squared plus 6x. And what do I know? Well, I want to write it in factored form, and I know one of the factors is x minus 1. And I don't know any of the other factors. I know there's going to be 3 of them, though. I could give them names. I don't really need to at this point. I'm just going to sort of leave them there to be solved. And how am I going to solve for them? Well, just like I would do algebraically anywhere else, I'm going to divide on both sides by x minus 1, my factor that I already have. So I'm going to be left with, on the right side, the 3 factors that I'm solving for, and whatever it is on the left side that I get from my division. So in order to divide, and I can just I could write this out on the side. I could actually do the division on the side, and you'll want to go ahead and do that. But think about it just from a basic standpoint. This is a first degree polynomial. This is a fourth degree. So your resulting polynomial is going to be a third degree polynomial, and it's going to have a leading coefficient of negative 1. So what I want you to do right now is pause the video, off to the side, go ahead and do that division, and then come back. All right, so hopefully that went well. When you divide this, you're going to end up with negative x to the third minus 5x squared minus 6x. And at this point, it's very easy for people to get lost, and they kind of forget what this tells them. Well, this is the three factors that we're looking for, right? We solved for them right here, and we found them. Except it's written as far as the factors being multiplied out, right? It's a third-degree polynomial, and so I know I can write it in terms of three linear factors. And so now the job in front of me is just, how do I factor this into three factors? What are the three factors that I'm looking for? And you might notice that a third-degree polynomial is not going to be our friend to factor. It's not going to be very fun to factor. But what is something that we have a good grasp of factoring? We're pretty good at factoring quadratic polynomials, especially if they have a leading coefficient, right? If I have some quadratic, I'll write off to the side, like x squared minus 4. That's something that I'm pretty good at factoring. And so what my goal would be is to go ahead and find a way to do something with this expression over here so that I end up with a quadratic somewhere in it. And in order to do that, I can factor out a negative x. All of these have a negative x in common. It's a common factor. So outside, I can pull out a negative x term. That's going to be one of my factors. And now I'm left with x squared plus 5x plus 6. And that's going to be easy for me to factor. So I can go ahead and do that, and I'm going to get, I still have my negative x here, and then my other two factors are just going to be x plus 3 and x plus 2. Reason being, right, I know my first term, x and x, those are going to give me my first term here, because when I FOIL, that's what I'm going to do first. And then I'm going to get the outer and the inner, and the outer is going to give me x and 2, x times 2 is 2x, and x times 3 is the inner, and that's 3x, and I add those together, it'll give me 5x. And then the outside, 2 and 3, will give me 6 when I multiply them. So this is the three factors I've been looking for. Notice I have three factors I'm looking for. I've found them. And so now I know all the factors to my polynomial. So if I wanted to go back here to the situation where I'm trying to write down my roots of my polynomial, I've done that. How have I done that? Well, now I can write down my polynomial, my fourth degree polynomial, in terms of the factors. So I'm actually going to do that up here so that we can very clearly see the factors. If I were to factor this polynomial here, I would have a negative x times x minus 1 times x plus 3 times x plus 2. Those are all the factors. I have my negative coefficient right here. I have 4 linear factors that will multiply together, and I will end up with my fourth degree polynomial. And so now I know all of the roots here. I know I have a root at 0. That's from that first term. I know I have a root at 1. It's from the second term. A root at negative 3. And a root at negative 2. I know the basic shape. I know my roots. And so now, sketching a graph of this function, all I'll have to do is use my roots and my basic shape to construct a graph. So I will shrink this down, and we'll go ahead and do that right now. I know the basic shape of my function, the end behavior, it's going to be going negative and negative on either side. And I have my roots. I have 1 at negative 3. I have 1 at negative 2. I have 1 at 0. And I have 1 at positive 1. And so my function, it's going to cross through at each root because it's an odd multiplicity, so each factor is going to change sign at the root. And so that means my whole function will change signs. So it's going to pass through at negative 3, pass through at negative 2, pass through at 0, and pass through at positive 1. And there's my function.